So I see two questions, one from Shrijit and one from Ratnesh. Shrijit, your question is, are we going to have discussions about these particular readings, that, aside from the readings that are specifically addressed to the tutorials? Is that the question?
Yes, sir.
So yes, I should have mentioned that. That's definitely anything that comes up in the readings is fair game in the tutorials, but this is also a good space right now, for instance, to have discussions about the readings in the lectures. But yeah, the tutorials are not going to be exclusively on the material I assigned there, but can be more general as well. I saw somebody else put up their hand, but I can't. The hand is down now. Okay, let's see who else is. Immanuel Kant. So, Ratnesh, this is in the context of that enlightenment essay that I put up, right?
No, sir. Just I wanted to know about him. Like, I'm from biotech, so sir, my professor was telling that like he has some philosophies about life. That at that time he was telling that life is made up of molecules and there are dynamic systems of that, and exactly that kind of thing we are finding like just 10 years ago and 20 or 20 years ago. Those kinds of systems are being like being studied more and more. So I just wanted to know like how did was like my professor was telling that he gone for 10 years for somewhere and after that he came up with all his philosophies and writings and those things are there. So like how did he knows about all these things? We still we want to know about that. Like,
This is not something that I'm familiar with, this aspect of Kant's work. So it might be better to, if you email me just more of these details, let me try and do some research on this. And I find it surprising what you say. But it's also a bit
yes,
removed
sir,
from.
I will.
Yeah.
I will.
Yeah,
Like,
send me an
I have
email with
the
some
paper
references
also.
and
Okay, sir.
and then we can follow this up. I would like to, that piece that I assigned for tutorial last week, I would like us to talk about it maybe 2 weeks from now. We can do that. Okay, good. So I see then. Okay, Sumedha. Our writing are judged on the basis of how well we are able to influence, while critical thinking encourages the opposite. In the case where you see that not only we need to be better consumers, but better producers too. Can you please give your opinion on this contrast between an ideal and real world? What do you have in mind, Sumedha, when you say in general our skills are judged on the basis of what's the kind of thing you have in mind?
Well, because critical thinking as a skill is so rare that every time I have participated in some kind of activity that requires some to write something and stuff, and I have observed that even if I use even if I am describing the same things as someone else, but based on the words we use to describe the same things, the writing efficiency or the richness of the writing is just differently. And in cases where critical thinking in the jobs or in the professions where the critical thinking is a must, for example like journalism and stuff, I think there are examples that the journalists are trained to use words in a manipulative manner. So how can we kind of prevent them from manipulating the masses when they are trained for so long to do so?
Okay. I don't know that I have a view on this. I certainly think we shouldn't do that. I think it's possible to write beautifully and to use nice language and also persuasive language without, shutting off people's or trying to shut off people's critical sensibilities. So I guess so I think, in terms of what we should do, I think we should not do, we should not try and manipulate people, to try and influence them using rational means. In terms of, is that unrealistic? Well, I don't know. I guess it just depends on what kinds of power you have in whatever context. And to what extent, if you're in a context where you have to use some of these skills in a bad kind of way. If you work for an advertising company, how do you do that? I don't have an answer. Maybe if you work for an advertising company, you can't actually, be honest in the way that you ought to be honest. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, like the exact example I was thinking of, like if the advertisement didn't hadn't contained the misleading kind of terms, then it won't be effective like the masses, because the critical thinking, in general, people don't think critically. Like it affairs. So, like,
Yeah.
how can we deal with such a contrast with?
So I don't think I have an answer to that. I mean, but maybe other people do. You're right. We live in an imperfect world, but I guess to the extent I have an answer is, yeah, we live in an imperfect world, but there are going to be lots of opportunities, small and large, to make the world a better. It sounds very cliche to say make the world a better place, but to at least not make it a worse place, in forms of pushing back. If you see and people do this, that if I don't know how many of you read newspapers, but newspapers have these, letters to the editor, or sometimes they're called the reader's editor, who will actually look at news articles and say, look, you shouldn't have said this, so you should have noted that this use of language was manipulative, and so you should retract what you said. So there are mechanisms of that kind. I think in the law, at least, there are laws against fraudulent advertising, though not against deceptive advertising, because you say deception is kind of built into the law. Sorry, built into advertising to some extent. Anyone else has thoughts on this? Sumedha, I don't know. Does that help what I just said? Maybe it's just depressing. I don't know.
Yes, like kind of. Like for example, the basic thing that we are getting from this course, or like by thinking critically and stuff, is we are preventing ourselves from being influenced by such things. Like the first thing on the like list is that we are not getting influenced. My point was like it's good that we are not getting influenced, but how to like prevent others to try to influence people. Like we as days pass, we as humans have a tendency to like search for loopholes through various stuff, and we always try, not we but humans in general, always try to exploit loopholes.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how do we make other people better people? It's maybe we can't. Right? Maybe all we can do is make ourselves better people, and then maybe we have.
We can't.
I guess we have smaller circles of influence, right? And families, friends, that workplaces. So that's one kind of circle of influence. I suppose when you guys will be in positions of leadership of some kinds, running companies and stuff, and you have greater circles of influence
then we can put these things into practice on a larger scale. Otherwise, we are not making the world a better place, but we are making our world a better place for ourselves to live in.
Yeah,
I guess
it's not a bad thing.
And that's not a bad thing. Like Okay.
But it's
That's
depressing
doable.
that we can't do more than that. You're right. I mean, look, I find I'm tend to be kind of depressed in some ways about the prospects of making the world a better place. Okay, let's take one more round of questions, comments, open-ended are fine, and then otherwise we'll move on to the next topic, which I think we'll have to cover properly only in the next class. Okay. So I've not used this Carol reading on definitions, and I may actually assign the reading from Hurley. I wasn't sure which to use. They say more or less the same thing. So definitions become important in the context of thinking critically for many reasons, and one of them we've already seen. We've actually seen two kinds of reasons, right? One is the case of vague and ambiguous terms from last time, and the other we just saw in the case of hedging, when you ask, look, well, how do you define, being involved in your company's affairs, or how do you define having a sexual relationship? It's important to see, and I think I don't know how many of you are in like the IIT debating, whatever it's called, society, or into debating in general. Only Amit. But I always have this fight with the debaters in my class, saying that you guys are the enemy. You're all, along with the advertisers, always involved in trying to trick other people. Is that right, Amit?
Sorry, Aryan.
Sorry, Aryan, I got confused. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it did cross my mind ki, like when we are studying all this, that I could use the same terms for my own benefit while actually going ahead and debating. So that I mean, I won't lie, that did cross my mind ki, I could use terms like this to make it sound more you know more of a convincing argument while presenting a debate, because in a debate, like, obviously the judge only has a limited amount of time to think about your arguments, and it would probably be more convincing if I can sort of implement some of these things in that. But I mean, I know it is sort of wrong, but then in a competitive debate, I think I think I would probably go ahead and use this.
So it's like I'm teaching a self-defense class, and then somebody in the class who's like, "Hey, I can use this. I know this self-defense tactic. I can use it to attack somebody." Or I know what to do to respond to this self-defensive tactic. Okay. The reason why I asked about debating is, do you find in debating this question comes up, like how do you define something, or give me a definition of something. If you can't define it, you don't know what you're talking about. Is that a debating tactic that people use?
Sorry, could you clarify once again?
Do issues of definition and asking the other side for a definition of something,
yes,
does that happen to you in the context of debating?
Yes, sir. So sometimes when the topic for debate is a bit vague, then it is up to you to sort of define the motion, and then you can obviously present a slightly biased definition without actually making it very obvious.
So what's an example of that?
I'd have to think. Give me like 5-10 minutes, and then should I get back to you?
Okay, well, maybe you get back to us in the next class, because
yeah,
we only have 10 minutes. Yeah, unless you can think of something before the end of class today.
Yes.
Okay, so questions about definition arise often, and like I said, particularly in the case of things like vague and ambiguous language. And the important thing for this section of the class is to have some sensitivity to the different kinds of definitions people give, and the role that definitions may have in in argument, and sometimes there can be a little bit of a mismatch. So I'm going to give a couple of examples. It'll become clear when we look at the examples what I have in mind. And the first kind of case that Carroll talks about is the case of a precising definition. And a precising definition is essentially when you make a vague term more precise, right? If you think back to these advertising kinds of examples, this has or whatever 50% more nutrition than its competitors, then you may ask for a precising definition. Well, 50% more relative to what metrics, which nutrients. When you ask for a precising definition, you are just getting clear on what it is each other are talking about. We'll look at that in a little bit more detail. Unfortunately, the examples that Carroll gives aren't very great. Why don't we have somebody read from here? Actually, maybe we just read this paragraph and think about it and we end there. So can I have a volunteer, somebody who's not read in class before in our discussion of qualitative vagueness? And we just talk through that and then we'll come back to the issue of definitions in the next lecture. Hello. Oh, their hands up. Sorry. Okay, Mukul, go ahead.
Okay. In our discussion of qualitative vagueness above, we mentioned borderline cases, those cases which were neither clearly in nor which were neither clearly in nor clearly out of a class. Some types of words are frequently used in ways that borderline cases cannot be resolved. Evaluative terms such as good and bad are notoriously vague. Relative terms cannot be used to express absolute or fixed quantities or qualities. For example, tall, not much, shortly. A relative term must have a fixed point of reference to relate it to. For example, an elephant is big relative to a human being, but small relative to an ocean. A flea is small relative to a horse, but large relative to a proton. Clarification of qualitatively vague terms may be achieved by giving specific criteria for their application.
Okay, just pause there. I think we may not have time to do more than just this passage in the video. We'll carry on in the next lecture. So we've talked about vagueness before, and we talked about borderline cases, right? So the case of the standard example being the property of being bald. There's some clear cases where somebody is going to be bald, there's some clear cases where they're not bald, and they're going to be borderline cases where it's really unclear whether they're bald or not. One set of cases where it may be quite unclear what somebody has in mind, in other words, something may be vague, is terms such as good or bad, right? So if you think about somebody who says India's infant mortality rate is decreasing at a good pace. We'll type that sentence out. People know what an infant mortality rate is? That's not the term that's vague, that's a very precise definition.
Yes, sir.
What is it?
From all the babies that are born, what percentage of the infants are dying?
And an infant is what?
And there is like particular limit, like I don't remember what the limit was, like
I think so. 0
I
to
think
6
it
years.
was
0
Okay,
to
hang on, a lot of
6
people. So Sumedha and then Hemant. Yeah, go ahead, Sumedha.
like there was a particular time limit, from birth, and let's say it's X number of days. I don't remember what X was in the definition, but from birth to X number of days, that's and in between that time, like that duration of an infant's life, if it dies, then it is counted as infant mortality.
Okay, Hemant?
Yes, sir. From 0 to 6 years, if any child dies, then it's called infant mortality rate.
Right, I don't think it's that. Are you looking it up or are you saying it from a good guess?
I think, sir, I have read this. I mean,
It's
maybe
still
this
1
is
year, 0 to 1,
That's
zero
right.
to
the age
1.
of 1 year.
I've just googled it.
Number of live births, number of people, babies who die before reaching the age of 1 and who were born live. No stillbirths or miscarriages.
And it's just a number calculated by out of 1,000 live births, how many died under the age of 1. That's the infant mortality rate. So that's actually a very precise definition. So if somebody, let me just copy and paste it.
Yeah, it says first year of life.
So that
Yes,
wasn't the issue that required a precising definition, but my point was
The
actually
issue
about this
was I
person
was
quote.
good pace. Like,
Yeah.
what do you consider a good pace?
And people could have a range of, not all ambiguities or vagueness need to be seen as forms of, deliberate malpractice in somebody else, or, trying to hide. People might reasonably use the term good in different kinds of ways, right? So in these contexts, somebody might say, look, it's a good pace because for a poor country, India is doing quite well. The infant mortality is, by the way, India's infant mortality rate, I think, is pretty bad in terms of the international average. I'm not sure. I'll post it. Asking for a precising definition. Suppose somebody says this, the Minister for Child and Welfare says India's infant mortality rate is decreasing at a good pace. One might well ask, look, what do you have in mind by a good pace? Do you mean it's better than earlier? Do you mean it's better than other countries similarly situated? Do you mean it's something that at this pace we're going to do very, very well within the space of a few years? All of these might be perfectly legitimate ways of using the term a good pace, and all of them are ways of it's a kind of ugly word, precisifying, or the term that Cal uses is this precising definitions. So precisifying or precisification, ways of making vague terms more precise, which in some contexts might be important, right? contexts involving either claims that are being made or contexts involving the clarification that two people are agreeing or disagreeing in with respect to the same things. Okay, I'm gonna stop here since it is 6:20. We'll take up the issue of definitions again on Friday, and as I said, I might just also give you another short piece of reading from Hurley to supplement this. So on Thursday, we'll take up both the issue of definitions, and we'll start with a little bit on the chapter on reasoning and argument. And I will post. I'll post your first assignment hopefully either tonight or tomorrow morning. Yeah. So have a good day or have a good evening, I guess. And I'll see some of you tomorrow. And TAs, let's meet on the TA channel at 6:30. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye,